These are the Clarkes, all of them connected by birth or marriage, and linked to these two people, Nobby and Muriel. This family tree shows the descendants of Nobby and Muriel. The Clarkes. But what about Nobby and Muriel, their lives and ancestors? Let's start with Nobby. He was born May 2013 in East Ham and christened Frank Stephen Maynard. He acquired the name Nobby when he was in the army. His mother and father were George Maynard Clarke and Gertrude Martha Toop. He had a brother, Roy, who was 6 years younger than Frank. Frank grew up in East Ham, in a house which he revisited in later life. Frank's father was born to a farming family in Little Ellingham, a village in Norfolk. Although brought up in London, Frank used to spend most of his holidays on the farm. He left school at 17, joined the civil service and became a customs officer in the Port of London. In the mid-30s, he met Muriel Chilcott, the lady he would marry. Muriel was born in Wandsworth, London, on the 21st of January 1911. Her father was John Alfred Chilcott. He was 56 when Muriel, the youngest of 10, was born to his second wife, Ellen. John already had 8 children by his first wife, Annie Coward, who unfortunately died in childbirth at the age of 36. So Muriel had 18 brothers and sisters, of which 13 survived to adulthood. Muriel grew up at the family home, 1 Acres Street, Wandsworth, which is still standing. When Muriel was born, there were 9 children, plus her mother and father living there. In later life, Muriel would recall a memory of seeing a Zeppelin drop bombs near Acres Street. This was a raid that took place in September 1915, when she was almost 5. Of course, with lots of brothers and sisters, she had plenty of playmates. This is her with Sister Olive. Muriel went to Mayfield School, where she excelled at sport. When Muriel left school, she trained to be a teacher, a profession which all her sisters had joined. Muriel was an emancipated woman. She learnt to drive and owned her own car. Then, in 1935, she met Nobby, and they were married in 1938. We have seen the root of the current Clarkes, but who were their ancestors? Let's go back in time. Nobby and Muriel were born at the start of the 20th century, around the time of the first flight by an aeroplane. If we go back another 100 years, we come to the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805. We can find ancestors at this date, but not the first one. We need to go all the way back to just after the Great Fire of London in 1666, over 350 years from today, to find our oldest known ancestor. We can go back 8 generations on Muriel's side of the family to John Chilcott, born 1670, 4 years after the Great Fire of London. He was married to Christina Allen, and they had a son also named John. we can trace a straight line from the first John Chilcot to Muriel. For over 150 years, the Chilcots lived in Burton Bradstock, a small village near Lyme Regis. It's interesting to note that during this time the name Chilcot got spelt as Shilcot, probably due to our ancestors being illiterate. In 1778 we come to Mary Chilcot, daughter of Joseph and Frances. At age 20 she had a son, Alexander. His birth records show that he was base-born. This means he was illegitimate. We have no records of who his father was, and Alexander took the surname of his mother, Chilcot. All the current Clarkes are descendants of this illegitimate Alexander. Apart from being illegitimate, we know a lot about him. Born in Burton Bradstock, possibly in this cottage, he went to sea aged 18 and became a master mariner. He was 5 foot 4 inches tall with blue eyes and brown hair. He died at age 66. We can't go back as far as 1670 on the Clarke side of the family. The furthest ancestor is James Clarke, born 1787. This was the time of the French Revolution. James was born in Deetham, Norfolk. He married Hannah Daniels and they had 9 children. Their third son, William, was father to Alfred. This was Nobby's grandfather. Alfred and his wife Caroline farmed at Green Farm, Little Ellingham, then Portwood Farm, Great Ellingham, both in Norfolk. Alfred and Caroline had 6 boys. Alfred, named after his father, died in the First World War. Frederick, centre of this group of brothers, was a railwayman. Charles was the rebel of the family. He was expelled from school because he punched his headmaster and soon after travelled to South Africa. He eventually settled in Australia, where distant relatives still live. Leonard and Frank continued to farm in Norfolk. George, the 4th son, Nobby's father, was born in 1883. He moved to London after leaving school and joined the Provident Insurance Company. He married Gertrude Toop in 1907 and they lived in East Ham. Gertrude gave birth to Frank in 1913. So, we have seen the ancestors of Nobby and Muriel. We left them in the mid-30s when they first met. It didn't take long for a proposal and marriage, which took place in July 38 at East Hill Congregational Church, Wandsworth. They started married life in a flat at 81 Thurley Road, Wandsworth. This was just 14 months before World War II broke out in September 1939. Soon after the outbreak of war, Nobby was co-opted into the army as a supply officer. Then, in 1942, Patrick was born at Thurley Road, seen here with his grandma and his cousin Roger. During the war, the family was evacuated twice to Finstall, near Bromsgrove. as Muriel's identity card clearly shows. Later in the war, Nobby was posted to India. Then, in 1946, as war ended, Trevor was born. Muriel had to cope on her own with 2 young boys, as Nobby had been sent to Germany. But there was plenty of aunts and grandma to help. In 1951, with Nobby back in England, the family moved to 1 Augustus Road, Southfields. Here we see 3 generations of Clarkes: Nobby and Muriel with Patrick and Trevor, George and Gertrude, Nobby's parents, and Ellen, Muriel's mother. Being the Clarkes, there were plenty of holidays in Felpham and the seaside. In 1958, Nobby, Muriel and the boys moved to Combe Martin Road, Southfields, southwest London. Muriel went back to teach him. Then, in 1970, Nobby joined the Lands Commission and he and Muriel moved to Dorridge. Nobby retired in 1975 and he and Muriel settled in Great Missenden. So, we have seen the ancestors. Let's look at the current generations. Patrick married Jenny. Trevor married Ruth. And from that came 2 Clarke families, with Miles and Emma, and Charlotte and Georgina. Now we get to the final generation. Miles, Gary, Oscar and Lily, Emma, David, Ollie and Jake, Charlotte, Steve, Will and Sam, and Georgina, Anthony, Madeleine and James. The Clarkes. So, it's now up to the younger generation to extend the family tree.